Robert Eggers is back with a modern version of Nosferatu, a project that's been in the works for almost a decade. A gothic period piece that's an alternate version of the famous Dracula story seems perfect for the director who brought us The Witch. Let's see if it lives up to expectations. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Blah.
This is a horror movie podcast. We get together and talk about a horror movie. It's that simple. Coming up on this episode, we've got a brand new release. It was a Christmas Day release, at least in the US anyway. It was a week later for the UK. But we were looking at Nosferatu, the new Robert Eggers directed movie. Obviously, it's not the first movie with this title. It's at least the third that I know of off the top of my head anyway. You've got the original 1920s version, Nosferatu, which was basically just, well, we can't do Dracula because it's copyright, so we'll do something. I actually just learned, I didn't know this, but apparently like Germany ordered that all copies of the movie be destroyed because Bram Stoker's estate was like, hey, we're not having that. And the only reason why the movie survived is because prints that had already left the country were kept and maintained, and that's why we can still see that movie today.
That's really cool. Yeah,
it's essentially, it's just an interesting bit of history that it was almost lost to time.
Whatever, David Zaslav's great grandfather.
Yes. Batgirl's the modern example of what could have happened to Nosferatu, for sure. Except you know that's sitting on a hard drive somewhere in the Warner Brothers offices, just sitting there next to Zaslav's anime collection or something. I don't know. So yes, and then of course there was a 1979 version by Werner Herzog, the one that I'm particularly fond of, which I like quite a bit. And that one notably actually uses the Dracula names. I assume by that point it was very much public domain, and it was like, hey, we can just call him Dracula now. We can say Jonathan Harker. We can say Mina, so on and so on. So I was actually curious. I didn't really know going into this because I hadn't checked if this was going to use the Dracula names or if it was going to be using other names. So there's a moment early on in this where they're sort of like saying, hey, you're going to go see blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, what's the Count's name? And he leans in and he's like, Count. And I'm like, oh, I actually don't know what he's going to say here. It could be one of two things. And then he said, Orlok. And I went, oh, we're okay. We're using all the Nosferatu names as opposed to the Dracula names. But it's still very much Dracula with a few key changes and a few things that I specifically think of as Nosferatu. But yes, obviously this movie was first like posed, I want to say before even The Lighthouse came out. It was like Eggers might be doing Nosferatu next, and it was like, oh, that's exciting. And then he kept doing other things instead, to the point where I was kind of convinced it was never going to happen. And then finally, in the last couple of years, he actually started moving forward with it, and here it is today.
I was thinking about that because I feel like we early on like had talked about it on the show, probably before we would do more like random like news episodes where we talk about headlines and stuff. And yeah, I was a little nervous because I remember hearing about it and it just sounded like almost too perfect. Like, knowing Eggers and then just thinking of his aesthetic, like him doing a period piece, heavy vampire flick just sounds like, oh, that's just like too good. I could see that like not happening. And then I think, like we there wasn't much news for a while. And then I think there was some things with like cast people dropping in and out, because I could be wrong, but I want to say like it was Anna Taylor-Joy was going to play
for a time she was going to be the lead, and I remember being disappointed because obviously she'd worked with them on The Witch, so it felt like a natural progression there. But I mean, there is a couple of faces popping back in from previous movies though.
Absolutely.
You got Willem Dafoe from The Lighthouse, but you've also got Ralph Ineson, who was in The Witch, and here as well. So there's a few faces coming back.
And then Skarsgård is the titular Nosferatu. I mean, technically not his name, but wasn't he in The Northman? Was that him?
No, you're thinking of the other Skarsgård. You're thinking Alexander Skarsgård.
Okay, so he switched it up.
He picked a different Skarsgård. To be fair, the build of Nosferatu in this made me think it could have been Alexander Skarsgård, because he's taller and skinnier than Bill is, but obviously it's under so much makeup and effects and stuff that you can't even tell it's him. Like, he just completely blends into the whole thing. So before we get any further, I'll just say we'll start spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we do go into the spoilers. And if you're enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps out a bunch. And you can support all the content in the show over at Patreon and get some bonus stuff. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, a lot of expectations going in. A lot of high expectations. I will say they were a little bit muted, I think, compared to what it would have been if he'd done this after The Witch. Because I think I like The Lighthouse, but I didn't like it as much as The Witch. And then I'm kind of lukewarm on Northman. I think The Northman is just okay. It's kind of, it looks good, but it's kind of bland. So, my opinion of Eggers isn't as like in the clouds as it was right after The Witch, when that was like a special, new, exciting thing.
Yeah, I would say for me, I love The Witch, or the Vivitch, as it's sometimes known. But I was pretty high on The Lighthouse as well. It's two like very different kinds of movies, because like, The Witch is very clearly like horror, and then I don't even really know what you call The Lighthouse. Like, I guess it's kind of horror, but it's like in a weird, I don't really know how to describe it, but I really enjoyed it. And then the Northman is weird because I don't know, like, I like it, but it's one that I don't really think about. I don't really have much desire to revisit. Like, I watched it and I was like, okay, I don't think it's bad, but it just has no lasting appeal, like, versus like Witch or Lighthouse, which I could very easily watch, like, at any time, really.
Yeah, and I think with this one in particular, because it's like a pre-established story that I'm fairly familiar with, not just Dracula in general, but specifically Nosferatu I'm familiar with. It's been a while since I've watched the other versions, but like, there was definitely
we did the Herzog one on the show at least, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that was probably like 5 years ago or something like that now. It's been a while. But, going into this, like, having an understanding of what the story usually is, and like some stuff I don't remember well enough to say, oh, there's definitely some changes here, but there's definitely some things where I'm like, oh, that's a new element that they've added in here that they've tried to flesh out, or they've done something else with. So we'll get into all that more so in spoilers when we can actually talk about all that. But I think, obviously, just to get going here, we should probably just answer the simple question up front. Tim, what did you think of Nosferatu?
So it's interesting. Like you were saying, I had very high expectations going in, and then because of the holidays, and then we had like everyone's kind of sick at our house for like a week and stuff, so I didn't go out and see it right away. So it was about like a week after or so that I went to see it, and leading up to it, I was really excited, and then after it came out, I don't know, I started seeing some people not really saying like negative things, but I feel like a lot of people I know were just kind of like, oh yeah, it was okay, or it was kind of good, but like not really going over the moon for it. So I was starting to get like a little nervous going in. I was like, okay, like, I don't think it's going to be bad, but maybe it's not going to be the slam dunk, that I was hoping it would be. So, I go in and see it, and it is always nice to go to the theaters. It's harder to get out these days, but I still like going there. And I gotta say, I just absolutely loved it. I was pretty much like hypnotized the whole time throughout, and it's it feels like tailor-made for me. Like I really love Eggers' style and aesthetic, and to me, Dracula is just kind of like the perfect horror story. I just love the lore and the characters and that kind of like gothic setting, and I don't know, it and especially like the way Eggers has interpreted it. I just think there's so many like breathtaking shots and so many things that just looked cool. And I thought, you know, the performances were all great. I was a little nervous like going in with Lily Depp. The only other thing I'd really known her for is yoga hosers, that awful Kevin Smith movie, which I, you know, sorry if he's listening, but that's like one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Oh, I'm sure he is. I'm sure Kevin Smith's an avid listener.
Hey, you know, for the record, I do like Kevin Smith. Yeah, I was a fan of his movies growing up.
Yeah, I'm not, but let me go.
I mean, his recent movies are maybe a bit tougher, but growing up, I liked his stuff. But surprisingly, I actually thought she did a really good job. I'm also, God, I don't want to sound mean, but I'm not like the biggest Nicholas Hoult fan. I don't know. I think he's a little bland and boring. And I just watched Juror number 2 before I saw this movie, which I like the movie, but I thought really anyone else could have played his character in that. But I don't know. Maybe it's like the setting or something. I actually thought he fit pretty well in this movie. And yeah, I thought Skarsgård just did a really great job as Count Orlok. I remember that was like a big thing going into it, because I feel like we didn't really get a lot of, you know, looks at what his interpretation of the character was going to be. Like, I felt like that was something they were kind of hiding from a lot of, like, you know, trailers and previews and stuff. And I don't know, I like what they did with him. The character I thought is very menacing, and I mean, again, with a lot of Eggers stuff, though, I just think the cinematography is like kind of the real star of the show. Yeah, again, is just so many shots I just really thought looked outstanding and captured a look and feel that I thought was really great. So I'm interested to see what you're gonna say, because again, after I saw this, I was really excited, and I feel like everyone I talked to has just been kind of like, yeah, it was okay. And so I don't know if I'm in the minority here, because I'm like ready to really praise this movie and shower it with love. And I don't know, it feels like everyone else I talked to is just not really had that same feeling. So
I mean, would you say it's divisive, or would you say it's just everyone's lukewarm?
That's the thing that's weird to me, because I almost feel like if I was talking to people that hated it, it would make more sense to me, because I could be like, oh, okay, I understand, like, you don't like that kind of style, or, you know, it was too slow for you or something like that, blah, blah. But it's just strange to me that, like, the people I talk to are just more like, oh, no, like, yeah, it was good, or it was kind of good, or, you know what I mean? Instead of being like, you know, oh my God, like, this ruled. Like, I would love to see it again. Like, I don't know. So it's strange to me. But what do I know?
Not a lot, I think we've established. Like I said, there was a lot of expectations going in, and there was kind of a not a negative response, but like a very muted response when it came out.
For it, yeah.
And it kind of like, oh, okay, maybe take the wind out of the sails a little bit and go in with reserved expectations and see what he does. And especially since, like, I really like the 79 version. Like, I really like Herzog's movie. So it's like, oh, it's got some, like, stiff competition in my mind of, like, what I'm going to compare this to. And I can't help but compare it, because it's the same story. It's the same thing. So
if it was just Dracula, it would be easier to look at it as its own thing. But Nosferatu is so specific.
Yes. It's honestly, Nosferatu is such a weird entity in fiction, because it's like, it's clearly Dracula, but it's got its own lineage as well, separate from Dracula, where it's like its own thing too. Because I was sitting there watching it, and as there were sort of interest in the story, I was thinking, is there people in this theater who don't know this is just Dracula and are going to be like, this is ripping off Dracula. This is just Dracula. What is that? I'm like, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's Nosferatu, damn it.
Which and I'm sure there were people like that, because I think this movie did pretty good numbers. Like, yeah, I think it's pretty much a hit.
I believe it's the best performing movie that Focus Features has ever had. Now, they don't make big blockbusters or anything like that, but it's doing well for them relative to what it is. So that's cool. So I mean, I like the movie. Just not to, I wouldn't milk the suspense that you did for 5 minutes. I mean, maybe even bordering on love. I will say, I do think I prefer the Herzog version still. Like, I think there's like an eerie quality to that, and maybe it's just because of when it was made and like the type of tools they had at the time just lended itself to a slightly different feel. Whereas, as great as this is, and the cinematography is gorgeous, it does feel like big and like, you know, relatively speaking, these are big lavish sets. There's, you know, the costumes, the effects. It feels like a more like modern produced movie, right? There's something kind of just rough and tumble about the Herzog one that just kind of adds to the raw quality of it that I really like. Yeah. But having said that, though, I do think this introduces some interesting ideas to try and flesh out and give more subtext to what's going on in the story. I do think some of the performances are quite good. If I was to make a critique, I would say that after the first like 30-40 minutes, I'm not really sure where it was time-wise, I do think the pacing gets a little muddy from that point on, where it feels like it's cutting around a lot of different characters, doing a lot of different things. I think, you know, typically you have this focus of like following the you know, I was going to say Jonathan there because that's the Dracula name, Thomas in this case, you know, going to meet the Count and all that stuff, and it's very focused for a stretch of time. But once you start like cutting around a lot more after that section is done, it feels like there's maybe like this movie's longer than the other versions of Nosferatu, but in some ways it almost feels like too quick at times because there's so much like going on. There's so much happens. Yeah, so many characters, so much cutting around. But there's so much great stuff in there throughout all the whole movie that it's hard to fall. And you know, it obviously it plays with shadows and the shadow of Nosferatu because that's always been a thing all the way back to the original version. So no, I mean I really liked it. If anything, it's probably my second favorite Eggers movie. I think if I was to place it into that lineage. I think The Witch is still better. I still think he's not quite captured just the oppressive feeling that movie had, but this one he's definitely trying to hit it, and there's definitely moments where you can feel this sense of like, oh, this thing's just pure evil, and they're doomed trying to deal with it. But maybe, if anything, I would say maybe they could have toned down like some of the dialogue. Like there's times when like Willem Dafoe is like monologuing or or whatever, where it's just like, you know, maybe just having less words would have just made some of this hit a little bit harder. It's almost like they were getting a little bit too into we're doing like a gothic drama, so we're going to have characters spit a bunch of old English at us for a while.
Yeah, so what's funny is I've heard people kind of say similar things, and I guess from what I've seen, kind of the central maybe complaint is maybe some of the pacing or just being like a little too long or something, which maybe on a second viewing, I don't know if that'll stand out more to me, but I don't know. I was just like so absorbed into the movie as I was watching it, which maybe it's just because it's just hitting on a lot of, you know, things that I enjoy, or I was just so caught up in it, but I really didn't notice it. Like, I mean, it certainly is a long movie. It's like, well, I mean, well, it's not like super long. It's just about 2 hours?
2 hours, 10 minutes, I believe is the
okay. Yeah, so it's not like it's like overly long. But I think he did say that he has like an extended cut or something.
He did say that, which I'm actually curious in, because I do think some of the pacing is actually too quick, which actually makes it feel longer than it is. But which sounds weird to say, but because it's like cutting around so many things, it feels quite exhausting. So if it's doing that for too long, it feels longer. So I'm actually curious what a longer cut looks like, and how much extended is it? Like, are we talking 10 extra minutes, 20 extra minutes? Like, how much is in there? Very curious to see, but yeah.
Especially, because I feel like they kind of hit on, most of like the major beats, from Dracula and stuff. I guess we'll wait till spoilers. Like, there's a few things that kind of left out or changed, but it didn't feel like incomplete or that there was a big like subplot missing or anything.
No, but I mean, Nosferatu is never meant to be a full adaptation of Dracula anyway. There's an entire,
Of course, yeah.
you know, in the Dracula book, it's been a long time since I read it, but like there was a whole journey at the end, you know, and like chasing Dracula across the countryside and all that, and that's, I don't think that's been in any of the movies really, except maybe the 1992 one.
Yeah,
So,
they touch on that one, but yeah, I know like people complain, or well, maybe not complain, but they say like there hasn't really been a movie that's kind of fully captured the book, but I don't get, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, but a lot happens in the book, like it would be really tough to like capture every little thing.
No. In a movie, certainly. I mean, if you do like more of a maybe like a 10 episode limited series or something like that, you could probably do it some justice. Yeah, I wasn't really judging it on those merits though. I don't think, especially in a Nosferatu movie, I don't go into expecting a adaptation of Dracula that's trying to like do everything that was in the book or be faithful. And because it is Nosferatu and not Dracula, there's more freedom for it to deviate and do its own thing. And there's absolutely things that I associate more with Nosferatu than I do with Dracula proper. And I think this kind of hits on most of the Nosferatu things. It adds some of its own stuff. So if we look at the cast though, because we've kind of mentioned them in passing a little bit, but so we got Lily Rose Depp as Ellen Hutter, who's kind of our main lead character, and she is more of a lead in this movie perhaps than even the 79 version, which I would say was, at least to begin with, way more skewed towards Thomas. But I think in this one, the opening scene is about her, and it makes it kind of clear that even if we're going to follow Thomas for a bit, she's kind of the central character that we're going to be, you know, it's really her story more than anyone else's in terms of the cast. So you got her, and she's good in this. She's doing like a lot of stuff here. Admittedly, I don't know if I get from this where I'm like, oh, I'm excited to see her do lots of other things necessarily.
Oh, sure.
I'm kind of in this weird place where I'm like, yeah, she was good in this, but I guess it's kind of similar to how you feel about Hoult, and I don't feel dissimilar, honestly, about Hoult. I've said this before, though. Nicholas Holt's an actor who I think he's perfectly fine, but that's about it. But his agent gets him into a lot of really good movies, so he's in a lot of things that I really like. It's really weird.
No, yeah, he has a terrific agent. And yeah, no, it's weird. Like I don't think he's bad, and I mean, I hate to like comment on people's looks, but I don't know. There's something about him that just kind of like, I don't know, just looks like a little too bland or generic to me. Like I don't think he's like a bad looking person or something, but I don't know. It just looks like kind of so, I don't know, just forgettable or something. I don't know. I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just, he's not like an actor I get like excited for.
The thing is though, is you specifically specified that you're not saying he's not you're not saying he's bad looking, but I think that's the point though, is that I think he's generically just a good looking guy. And maybe one of the problems we have in modern movies is that all actors have to be like stereotypically attractive. Like where's the mid looking actors? Where's the interesting faces that are a bit weird? And maybe some people will be attracted to them because, you know, it'll speak to some people, but where's the weirdos? I don't feel there's enough weirdos in Hollywood. Well, yeah, like the villain here, Count Orlok, Bill Skarsgård, you know, he's dosed in heavy makeup and probably some other effects as well to get the look, where in the 1979 version of Nosferatu, it's just Klaus Kinski. He's just a weird guy who can play weird and has a weird face. It's like, yeah, they've given him the longer fingernails and whatnot, but it's mainly just him because he's that much of a creep. And like, you know, so there's a level of like just raw authenticity to that I don't think you can match it. And this is not complaining about Bill Skarsgård. I'm just sort of using that to illustrate the point that I think you're making about Nicholas Hoult. He's just Blandy McBlanderson. Yeah. But hey.
I do agree. We need to get back to like more like interesting character actors versus just constant like, you know, good looking models.
Yeah. I think that's my problem. Like, I guess what I was saying with Lily Rose Depp as well is that she is just look like a supermodel, like all the time. Like that's just what she looks like, in every manner. And I don't know if that's necessarily just because it feels like it clashes with the period piece that they're going for, because I don't think anyone looked at this back then. But just, it is a sort of running problem that a lot of movies have. Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I either didn't know or didn't remember was going to be in this, he plays Frederick.
Craven himself.
Yes, or Friedrich, I should say. What's funny is I got a trailer for 28 Years Later before this, which he's in, and I also got a trailer for Superman,
I didn't realize he was in it.
which Nicholas Hoult is in. So it was just funny. I was getting like previews of a lot of the actors that were in this before the movie started. So Aaron Taylor Johnson, he's doing the rounds. Yeah, like you said, he was just in Craven. He's going to be in 28 Weeks Later, or 28 Years Later, sorry. And then I will say this: 28 Years Later, at least they shot it with proper cameras. I was pleased to see that in the trailer.
Oh yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen our review of 28 Days Later, we kind of shat all over how bad it looked.
It's such a shame because I think there's a lot of stuff that's very cool about that movie, but yeah, it's just a little tough to watch on modern, equipment.
Yeah, they finally made it available though to actually like buy and rent digitally in the last like month, so that's something.
I mean, I do think it's cool that like the trailer got like so many downloads that they're like, oh, we have to make this available now. Like, I think that's always nice to see that, people can kind of make a change like that. So yeah, and for what it's worth, I'm pretty intrigued by the trailer. That'll be one for next year that I'll be looking forward to. We're gonna do our annual year preview coming up soon, so we'll probably talk a bit more about it there.
Yeah, that's a Patreon thing though, for the record. As part of even more streams over on Patreon, that's coming in the next week or so. As for the rest of the cast, we got Willem Dafoe as Von Franz, who is basically the Van Helsing parallel. He's not the exact same as Van Helsing, admittedly, but this is basically the role he's filling.
And I know like some people have said that like he kind of feels out of place in the movie, like he is like, I mean, like you were mentioning, like he goes on these kind of big monologues, and I wouldn't say he's like a wholly comedic character, but sometimes it can be kind of funny. But I don't know. I thought he definitely stole the show. Like Willem Dafoe, obviously very good actor. I mean, I guess it's very hard for him not to take focus whenever he's on screen. But I really like the character.
He kind of feels like you could very easily see how this guy is the one who moves to the lighthouse and is just the same character.
Yeah.
You could definitely see that in his performance. Emma Corrin plays Anna, who's Friedrich's wife. So yeah, interestingly, she was in a show called A Murder at the End of the World, which co-starred the guy from the Nicole Kidman movie trailer that I saw. So not quite not quite a preview for who was in the movie, but there was a connection to someone in the movie. And then Ralph Ineson's kind of the last person I think that's. Well, actually, I was probably mentioned Knock as well. He's like the Renfield of the movie, played by Simon McBurney. But yeah, Ralph Ineson, who's got that very notable voice, he plays the doctor who, does a lot of doctoring in the movie.
I mean, if there's anyone in the cast that was like born to, play someone in the 1800s, like I feel like he just fits in so well. Like he just looks so old timey, and that voice, I don't know, there's a gruffness to it that feels like someone that's living in harder times.
Yeah, I don't know how he should take that as a person, given that's just his voice, but yeah, I get you.
I mean, it's a great voice. Yeah, I love it, but
yeah, he definitely fits into period pieces. I
can't imagine that voice talking about like Pokemon or something,
I bet he's a big fan. Now that you've said that, I'm sure he's into the Pikachus and the Charizards, and I've run out of Pokemon. That's the only ones I know.
Well, one day we'll do the movies on here.
No, we won't.
The first one has like some horror elements to it.
I mean, I'm horrified at the thought of watching them, but that doesn't count.
Actually, it might be a bit more Ace territory now that I'm thinking about it.
It's all right.
It is like a bit sci-fi because they're cloning certain Pokemon, and like they have like these ones in like test tubes that break out and have psychic powers and stuff.
Yeah, don't worry.
I'll talk to David about it.
No need. We won't be doing it on Ace either. He doesn't get to have any say in what we do on Ace. I didn't make the mistake I made with you, where I gave you some modicum of power. I put my foot down the second David stepped on. I will tell you what you're watching, and you will like it. Or not, as the case may be. That's what the review's for. But
here, just sign this contract. I can't tell what it says. Oh, it's in my native my country's native language. Don't worry about it.
Hey, look at that. You worked a bat round it in Nosferatu. Very good. Yes. All right. Are we ready for spoilers? Maybe we're ready for spoilers.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Let's just get to it. All right, so spoilers for Nosferatu. You have been warned. So, I mean, the big thing here, right, and I don't know, we'll probably dance around and jump around here a bit more than we normally do, is, to me, the big thing that was added here, unless I'm just completely forgetting from previous versions, but the whole idea of Ellen's character being in some way connected to Nosferatu from before the events of the movie, like, you know, before Thomas goes to visit him and like sell him the property and all that stuff that usually happens at the start of Dracula, that feels new to me, and kind of the implications and the subtext that comes from like whenever it comes up that she has this. I mean, just to explain it, as we find out throughout the movie, she has like I won't call her psychic, but she has like more of like a genuine connection to the spiritual world. That's how Willem Dafoe's character puts it. And effectively, because of her upbringing, where her dad got scared of her ability, he would get more and more cruel and cold and distant from her, and it made her feel lonely. And she basically just reached out into the spirit world, or into the nether world, whatever you want to call it, and something answered back. And it was, you know, this is what the opening scene's kind of showing, is that he's not physically there, but Nosferatu in shadow form comes to her, and seemingly like they have sort of like mental sex, and arguably I think you could even call it sexual assault, but where, you know, she goes out into the field in front of the house and starts like writhing about and moaning and whatnot.
Like I guess it's mental in the sense that like his physical body's not there, but she's certainly having a very harsh physical reaction to it. Yeah.
It's kind of like, is it sort of halfway between, because there's definitely some scenes later on where she's almost like Regan in The Exorcist when she's having like sort of like episodes. So I kind of imagine like a Regan in The Exorcist, but like it's happening in her head kind of thing as it's going on.
Like, can you imagine like the auditions like she had to go through? It's like, all right, now writhe around all crazy and like.
I thought there was going to be more to that sentence, Tim. I thought I'll let you keep going, but you just thought no, I won't even put on a full stop. I
can't describe it. It's too I'm too good a boy to go into some of the implications of what's going on there.
So I have to be the bad guy then, do I? And
the perv, yeah.
Not the perv, how dare you? So
I will say though, I do like this wrinkle to the story. Because it just makes the character, you know, a bit more interesting and layered than just kind of, you know, like a typical damsel in distress or whatever. And I like that there's a, you know, reason why, you know, Count Orlok becomes so obsessed with her. Like I could be wrong, but like I don't think it's an actual plot in the book Dracula, but in like, you know, the 92 Coppola movie, I think there was like a whole thing where Dracula is obsessed with Mina because, you know, she's like looks just like his, you know, or he thinks she's the reincarnation of his dead wife or something like that, which I don't know, I'm not like kind of crazy about, you know, that plot line.
Yeah, but I mean, forgetting Dracula for a second, just looking at Nosferatu, if I recall correctly, at least in the 79 version, like there's no reason other than just he wants to move, I think. Well, maybe there's more to it than that, but certainly the reason he's got in this movie is not in there. And it's not until Thomas or Jonathan in that case is there and he sees her photo in the locket where he sort of decides, oh, I want her. Like, that's it. Like, now she is now my love. I'm going to go after her. And he becomes obsessed with her. Whereas in this movie, they present the idea that he has like reached out and made his Renfield, the guy who runs like the realtors, I guess you'd call it, the whatever. He has reached out and specifically requested Thomas to come out to him because he already wants Ellen. He already wants her. He's already infatuated with her, and the idea they get into in the movie is that she was having all these episodes and she was very much like kind of sick because of it, and she was kind of retreating into this madness of like just letting this monster come to her in the middle of the night psychically. And then at some point she met Thomas, and that love kind of cured her. It kind of brought her back to reality, and she's sort of quote unquote been normal ever since they've been together. But now that he's leaving again, she starts acting out again. And the idea is that Nosferatu in this movie like is like he now like misses her. He wants her back again. He wants to reach out and be there physically, and that's why he wants to come to the city, and it's why he requests that Thomas come to him, because he not only wants him to sign this deal, which apparently is like Thomas signing away the rights to his wife or something, but also because he wants to kill him so that that love is gone, and then Ellen's just left for him. Of course, it's just by happenstance that Thomas is able to survive and sort of make it back, and that adds some wrinkles into the rest of the story. But it's a very kind of like possessive obsession, and like he's coming for her. I think I like a lot of this because of the way it's framed, in that, I mean, this entire thing reframes how the story progresses in general, because there's this like different motivation from Nosferatu in a lot of ways. But I like how it reframes from the sense that she only let this monster in psychically because she was already having such a bad time because of society. And I think this movie ends up really talking about basically just sexism and basically how people around her treat her, even the well-meaning men, and how they kind of like either disregard things she says, and not even just the men, actually, even her like her best friend, Anna, the other woman in the movie. Like the way she disregards like all of her worries and like the nightmares she's having, and says, no, don't worry about that, just be normal, right? I was definitely getting parallels to what was happening to her in her dreams, or in like, you know, this past of like growing up as a victim of sexual assault. And I actually have two minds about it. Like, I'm not sure if the idea is that her father actually, not that he was necessarily actually doing that, but he kind of represented the idea that a parental figure is doing that, and that Nosferatu represents the darkness and the demons that she turned to survive, or if it's just the idea that her father was distant from her and she let in the monster who then is the abuser. Whether or not Nosferatu is the abuser himself, or he represents the darkness from within that's created because she was being abused, I'm a little 50-50 on that, because there's that line later on in the movie where she asks Van Helsing, or Von Franz, she's like, hey, you know, does darkness come from within, or is darkness something that gets let in? And that's like the idea of like, I mean, I think ultimately it's a bit of both, but I think that question kind of made me like think back to like everything the movies like told us by that point, and I was thinking, oh, this idea that the darkness is partly coming from within her, and that made me think that Nosferatu is kind of like the analogy, or the representation here is that this great darkness was created in her because of what she went through, and it's something that she's living through, and that's why at the end of the story she's the one that has to deal with it. She's the one who has to like sort of put an end to it. But I think it works either way. I mean, I'm curious to hear other interpretations of things, but we'll get into, you know, all the details. But I don't know. I just blotched a lot at you, Tim. Thoughts?
No, I mean, I think those are, definitely interesting questions. And then, it's, I would say that there's something to it being like, you know, the idea that it's a more repressed society, so she can't just simply, you know, go out and like, you know, talk this through like with people or whatever. So I guess it kind of is like letting that darkness in or whatever, and then it's harder to you know, communicate that with people, especially, when you start getting into things like about sex, and even if she's being assaulted by this thing, through no fault of her own, like people will still, chastise her for it. And then, I do like, ultimately the ending is her like, taking agency, and like, she's the one that ends up defeating the monster. Like it's, in a very shitty way, but, like in a way that sucks for her. But, it is.
To be fair, she wasn't the one sucking in the scene.
True. But I mean, ultimately, like, it is a sad story. What happens to her in the end, but
it's a tragedy. Absolutely. Like, there's no other way to frame it.
But I do like that she is like, the one that defeats this monster. It's not like, the three strong men riding in and, shooting him down and then stabbing him with a sword or something. It's like, she's the one that, has to, vanquish him, I guess.
Yeah, because I think when you look at all the other characters in the movie and how they treat her, and I think the idea that she's in a world where even people who want to sympathize and help her don't want to actually hear or listen to what she wants to talk about. Like, every time she tries to tell people what happens in her dreams or her nightmares, and we know that they're more than just nightmares, like, she's basically told repeatedly by the people that care about her genuinely. Like, I don't think the people around her are all like awful people, but they basically disregard and say, oh, that's all crazy talk, you're fine, everything's fine, don't talk about that. Her best friend, who is a woman, also doesn't want to hear about the awful things she's experiencing, because we don't want to deal with that. Don't put that on us. You keep that to yourself, and that's just crazy talk. And all the characters are around her, and to some extent, are kind of like that. And the biggest example is Friedrich, who's got a little bit more going on in that respect. But what were you gonna say?
Oh no, that's just making me think of the scene where the doctor like, is examining her and then just like takes, I'm guessing like chloroform or something, and then just, like presses into her.
Yeah. This is the solution, is just to put her to sleep, so she's not raving like a mad woman. Because they don't want to listen to her because it's too uncomfortable. It's just a dark truth they don't want to hear. Yeah, because the thing with Friedrich, which I think in a lot of ways he ended up being like the key to this movie for me to understand what it was like talking about and saying, because when he's introduced early on, and it's right before Thomas is going to go on his trip to like do the paperwork with the Count up in his castle, 6 days away on horseback. No, sorry, 6 weeks away on horseback. He they have like a dinner party, and he's with Friedrich, and Friedrich is talking about various things, and he brings up they've got 2 kids, him and Anna. They have 2 girls, and repeatedly there's little hints throughout the movie that they keep referring to this new unborn baby as a boy, which suggests to me that he really wants a boy. And it's like, okay, so that's thematically relevant, that he sees more value in having a son, and that's the third attempt at it. But also this idea that when it comes up that they're expecting another, he says, oh, I just can't help myself. He doesn't say we decide to have a baby or we are a couple of wild animals. He says I couldn't help myself. So it's very much framed from the desires of him, and the wife is just there to serve those desires. And that kind of follows through, because there's moments throughout the whole thing where he's not like an evil guy necessarily. He's not like a monster constantly. He tries to be nice about things, but there are times when pushed where he'll tell Ellen when she's, starting to, rant and rave about what's going on, to know her place, know your place, woman. He says things like that. Or he'll say the things that Van Helsing's saying is, oh, that's a mad person's things. This is all nonsense. He constantly talks, he tries to sort of play it like he doesn't care. But then as the movie goes on and he becomes more stressed, he starts like talking about the fact that he's basically covering the costs of Thomas and Ellen because they're poor right now. And that's why like Thomas getting this job to go and deliver these papers to the Count was a big deal, is because like, hey, you're financially needing this money, and it's a whole thing. So it's this constant idea of like the way society views like success, and like how society measures it, and that's like through wealth and like having kids, and like that's all Friedrich kind of represents, and like all he wants, and that's all he kind of talks about. He doesn't want to talk about what Ellen's going through. He's sick of talking about it. There's a whole scene where he's talking to his wife and he's like, let's not discuss Ellen. Let's not discuss the ravings of the mad woman. Let's talk about other things. We must ignore all such things. And that all leads to the sort of bitter ending that when Anna finally dies at Dracula's hands, and the kids die as well. Like, he loses his entire family. Like, even in death, he kind of just, like, ends himself on top of her body on a corpse and dies like that, because it kind of feels like it wasn't about the love and the romance. It was more about, like, oh, I had achieved a wife, I had achieved kids, I had achieved all these things, and now I don't have them, so he'd rather just be dead with her now than, I don't know. It was like, again, I don't think he's like actively like a horrible human being throughout. I think he tries to maintain himself in this very civil way, but there's kind of this undercurrent of just the systemic idea of like what success is, what a man's supposed to be, what a woman's supposed to be, and how uncomfortable any deviation from any of the norm is to him.
Yeah, he's certainly like the status quo, and then you can see like how frazzled he gets like when anything is, you know, changed from that, which is, you know, like a very interesting idea. And I agree, like he's like he doesn't seem like an evil person or whatever, but in a way you can kind of like understand it, I guess. Like, I mean, obviously not like the you know, maybe like being kind of like sexist or you know, kind of upending that status quo or whatever, but I mean, the idea of like going crazy because, you know, you're losing like your wife and children and stuff is like, you know, very relatable. Like you know, I can see that. But I don't know, it's interesting. Like, there's definitely like a lot of stuff here that feels like, you know, themes that could easily be very relevant today. Like, yeah, there's lots of stuff about like class, and then obviously like a lot of, you know, stuff about like, you know, women in society, and, you know, like their bodies, and like, you know, how much like men have say over this kind of stuff. So yeah, there's definitely like a lot going on in the movie.
Yeah, because everyone's like in some way claiming ownership of the of Ellen in this movie, right? You've got, and again, it's not like Thomas is an awful husband or an awful human being or anything like that by any means. But at the same time, there's some scenes where kind of some of that raw. There's a very interesting scene about 2/3 through where she kind of starts having like an episode where she's like saying some sort of meaner things or nastier things, and it kind of provokes him to act kind of like an animal himself. And he's not, like, I mean, maybe he's been affected by like the power of Nosferatu, because the entire city kind of is at this point, but he kind of does start acting like an animal, because she basically says at one point, oh, you'll never like take me like he could, and he just immediately like throws her down and they start having sex, and it's kind of, you know, it feels like, oh, you just questioned his manhood, so he has to like immediately like prove it in some way. Yeah, he has to show, and I mean that's kind of what she's going them into, to be fair, but like I think both characters in that scene come out feeling like, oh, this is the ugliest parts of both of you. Like, this is like where the movie's being very raw and saying, like, they both have these flaws deep within that are kind of coming to the surface here. And if anything, it kind of strengthens them as human beings afterwards, or as characters, because we can like, okay, they're not perfect human beings. Like, no one in this movie certainly is. So I don't know, it made the film more real to me. Some of the parts like that, which is cool.
Yeah, and I like the idea that, like, you know, for a while I thought that it might be leaning towards something where she was just going to be like completely under his thrall, and you know, she's just going to be like kind of like I don't know, his slave or whatever. But I like that, you know, she pretty much like, you know, kept her like autonomy throughout, you know, most of the movie. And I mean, it's like a pretty specific plot point where he gives her like 3 days or something to accept him, and like, you know, she pretty much, you know, keeps denying him until like the last day. But even that, it's more like she's, you know, taking him as a way to defeat him. So I definitely like that aspect of it.
Yeah, and the whole thing with like her kind of sacrificing herself to kill Nosferatu, or to kill Count Orlok, is that, you know, like, because the others are all gearing up to like go and try and kill him, and they're like, hey, we're going to find his grave, we're going to find out where he's sleeping, we're going to stab him, sunlight, whatever. and she basically takes von Franz aside and says to him, "Hey, this isn't going to work, right? You know it's not going to work." And he's like, "Yeah, I know it's not going to work." And she's like, "It has to be me, right? Like, that's the whole thing, is that I'm the only one who can defeat him." And he's like, "Yeah, I'll take them on this false hunt, but that's just to give you time to do what actually needs to be done." I think I appreciate that she's not told that she has to do it. She decides, she realizes that she has to do it on her own, and then he just kind of like confirms it and backs it up that he believes that's the case. It's funny because I feel like he's kind of conflicting as a character, Dafoe's character, because he does seem to start to enjoy some of this a little bit, where later on when they're burning like the crypt, the box with his dirt is in it, he starts like sort of like smiling and laughing as the place is on fire, and I'm like, I don't know, like, I'm starting to not to trust you with how much you seem to be getting into this, but at the same time he's also the only character who listens to what she wants the entire time. Everyone else is constantly saying, "This is what you should want, this is what you should do, this is what is proper." He's the only one who listens to her and says, "You're right, you've come to the right conclusion. I'll help you achieve it."
Yeah. I feel like part of it might be, you know, 'cause they kind of set him up that he's like this respected doctor that kind of went off the deep end and fell into the occult, and then seems like maybe doesn't have as much respect or something he once had. So I wonder if, you know, this kind of gleefulness, towards like the end of the movie is him being like, "Oh, okay, like all that stuff that I've been dedicating my life to, like it's real." Like, you know, because I think he says before, like, "Oh, I never really encountered like a vampire or whatever before. Like I only know about this stuff in books." So I don't know if like part of it is like, okay, yeah, I didn't waste my life. Like this is all real, and like I can actually, I don't know, be of some use or something.
Yeah, that's possible. Actually, I didn't even think of it that way. That's a good idea. I do love as well that when he finally like realizes what they're doing, because at first it's like, "Oh, it's a plague has come to the city, there's some demon doing this to her, that's why she's having these episodes." And then once it's like, "Oh no, people are getting bit, it's spreading like a virus and blah blah blah," he eventually does have the whole thing. This is a vampire. He doesn't say vampire, he says vampire, which I pop for because but yeah.
And like and I know the plague stuff and the rat stuff was like a big part of the Herzog Nosferatu, so it's nice that you brought it back. But then I hate even thinking about it because it still feels like so recent, but obviously like it feels very like real worldy because of like, oh, okay, we're talking about like plagues and quarantines and like all this stuff.
Yeah. I don't think there's too many parallels, but I get why some of those words might just trigger you because of the recent memory. Yeah. So no, all that stuff's cool. So just to go back, because there's a lot of stuff like in the movie to talk about, and not we have to go beat for beat or anything, but just generally speaking, the opening of the movie introduces to the characters. The first scene is like a few years ago, where the first time seemingly Ellen let Orlok into her like psychic world, into her dreams as a shadow form or whatever. And then we're interested in the characters. They're recently married. He needs money. He's going off to make this deal. We have the dinner party with the friends and so on. And notably, the two daughters do say at one point, "There's a monster in the room," which
Papa, Mama,
which is this idea that the shadow is following her. That it's this thing that's around. Which again is what made me think of someone who's lived through some kind of dark thing, like an abusive childhood or something, where it's always there lingering and no one else knows how to like talk about it or listen to her talk about it. So, but when he goes on his trip, one of the things that I really like in the Herzog version is the way it feels like such a hard trip, where he's like going up like the sides of mountains, and it feels like it's a really, there's like sort of chanting and operatic music playing, like an organ's playing as the journey's happening. Here he finds like a small village, which may happen in the Herzog one as well, but I don't remember it specifically.
If it does, I don't remember it, or maybe it wasn't like as big a part. But I actually really like this scene.
Yeah,
this whole like little village segment.
Yeah, they don't speak his language, and they basically tell him to get lost, especially when he starts talking about the castle nearby, because like, "Oh, you don't speak of the castle." I mean, this is the thing in Dracula though, because even like several Dracula movies start with Jonathan Harker character at like a tavern or something in like the village near the castle, and when he says he's going there, they all like go, "Oh, you don't do that." So that is definitely a common thing in Dracula movies, but I don't know. I don't think the other Nosferatus, well, at least the 79 one, I don't think did it as much, but yeah, he has a whole thing where he wakes up at night and sees like the town doing a ritual where they've got a naked virgin riding on a horse, being taken out, not to sacrifice her. I think that's maybe the first thing people will think of when they see this and they hear what they're talking about. Apparently it's more about detecting where a vampire is, and it's effectively they find like a fresh vampire that's been made by Orlok and kill it with an iron stake. So we're doing the iron rule in this movie, not the wooden stakes. And obviously this just freaks out Thomas because he doesn't know what's going on. He's like, this is just barbaric. What's going on here? And he does the whole wake up as if it was a dream, but then he looks down at his feet and sees them covered in mud. Which the movie does this a couple of times. It doesn't actually do the bullshit this was a dream thing, but it does do the wake up as if it was a dream, but it actually happened. It always actually happened. But it does do that transition a few times. So depending on if you're sick of that as a tactic, that might annoy you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't bother me that much. Because again, like I think it's a different case when it's like, oh no, this is actually happening, and it makes sense if it's like, oh, there's weird stuff going on and it's, I don't know, like affecting you, and it's happening like late at night and you're witnessing it and not even knowing if it's a dream or not. And then so it works. I like the whole scene. Like it's I thought it was interesting and like unique, and then I just like the idea that he wakes up and like the whole village is gone and his horse is gone. It just like has such an eerie feeling of like what the hell is going on. And now like, yeah, it's already like, you know, he's had a hard journey and stuff, and it's like, oh, now his horse is gone and like he has no idea what happened. And I just like that kind of feeling of dread and like loneliness and stuff.
Yeah, because once he's on his own and he has to walk the rest of the way, it feels like this is where it gets maybe the closest to the Herzog version, with like the hardest part of the journey. But there's a lot of like ethereal things here where he'll get to like the sort of the big gate at the start of the bridge and just kind of opens on its own. There's the fantastic shot of him walking through the forest, and that's when
so good.
Yeah, the carriage with the horses comes up, and there's no one there. The door opens on his own, and he just gets in because he's so weak that he's like, well, I guess this is the idea, and it takes him up to the castle, and all the shots going up there, going through the doors, and you know that final door that opens, and like Nosferatu's standing there, and the way the movie like hides how he looks for so long, where he's just in silhouette, or he's out of focus, or he's in the background but not well lit, so you can't really see him. And you know, it's not really until he comes and talks to Ellen in person where you actually get a full look at him. And you can see the mustache in all its glory, which is the big thing that sticks out as being very different design wise, is that he's got a goddamn mustache.
Yeah, but I mean, it definitely like works for that character. I love the voice that Skarsgård is doing. It's like, it's so like big and booming, and I don't know, it's very effective. Like even when he's off screen, just hearing that voice, it's like, oh, like it sounds like this is not a person that, you know, I want to see. So yeah, all this stuff is really great. And I especially love like that scene you're talking about when he, you know, he's walking through like the woods and he sees the carriage and stuff, and it's just like lightly snowing. It just it looks so fantastic. And then I'm guessing this is like kind of a Christmas movie because like it seems to be in the winter. There's snow. I think at one point it looks like there was kind of like a whatever passed for like a Christmas tree, you know, around that time. So yeah, if you ever needed another horror movie to bust out around Christmas, yeah, I think it's a good contender.
I don't think it's a big enough because it moves through too much time for it to really feel like a Christmas movie. But I do think there is one part of it that technically is taking place around Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do a whole thing where, you know, I think the big thing that stuck out here is like the attitude that Orlok has with Thomas during all these early scenes, because typically Dracula will be very cordial and pretend to be a really gracious and nice host as he's suggesting certain things or whatever, whereas this Count Orlok is like just like, you'll address me as Lord, as my forefathers knew me before. Sit down, we'll do this now. Like he's barking orders. He's been kind of intimidating and scary.
What's kind of funny is, even though, you know, technically it's not Dracula, it does feel, and I mean, it's been many a year now since I've actually read the book, so maybe people like correct me if I'm wrong or something, but I feel like Orlok seems more like the Dracula from the book, though, because he's like grosser and meaner, whereas like I feel like it's a movie thing that kind of wanted to make him more suave and like debonair, you know.
I don't think he was like as angrily mean in the book, but he definitely had more of a monstrous appearance. I remember that being described, and it's really the 1931 movie that said, no, Dracula's a really attractive, like, you know, alluring man.
Sex him up.
Yeah, we got that Bela Lugosi factor. So that's one thing that Nosferatu is. That's almost like kind of what's separated them in a weird way. Is that Nosferatu is allowed to make him look ugly? Like that's what Nosferatu is. It's ugly Dracula, but that's actually what he was in the book.
Yeah, and then I gotta say, like, I love. I mean, in pretty much any, you know, adaptation or whatever of Dracula, this stuff with Thomas or Jonathan in the castle is like some of my favorite. I just love the like exploration and, you know, that steady sense of realizing more and more like how trapped you are, and then like the desperate escape. And I think Eggers does again such a good job like of I don't know if they filmed in an actual castle or whatever, but I think the sets just look great. And I love how it's like, oh yeah, like, you know, it's a big castle, but it's like, you know, it's like disgusting, and like there's, you know, like rats and stuff. And then, well, I shouldn't say disgusting, I guess it's still like castle like, but, you know, seeing like rats and all this crap. And then all like the lighting from the candles always like looks so good. And then again, just the more and more you get of Orlok and how like domineering his presence is. I
think I said earlier, the first time you get a good look at him is when he goes to speak to Ellen. That's actually a lie, because the first time you get a good look at him is when Thomas finds his crypt in the castle, and he wakes up and rises up and he's completely naked, dong out and all.
Oh, that's right.
And it's like, oh shit, this is really imposing. This feels very unique to the visuals that we've seen prior in Dracula and Nosferatu stories. And from that point on, like, Thomas is running for his life, and you know, he kind of escapes in the way that he normally does, which is he gets out onto a ledge and jumps into the river, kind of thing. But very bombastic. There's also a notable part here where one of the nights in the castle, he's having nightmares of Orlok coming for him, like this monstrous figure over the top of him. But there is one moment where it turns into Ellen, like a naked version of Ellen, with blood coming from her mouth. This idea that this evil that he's now terrified of is connected to her. You know, this idea that, you know, the shadows she's brought with her into their relationship is now haunting him. I thought was a really cool idea, and certainly a stark little visual for it to just cut to her for a second during that nightmare scene.
And I mean, he has like been feeded on him, because he has like the like marks on his chest.
Yes,
which,
yes.
I guess is again, I forget if this is in the other versions of Nosferatu, but it seems like he sucks from. Is that maybe where your heart is, or kind of somewhere on the chest, like the
heart's in the chest? Yes, Tim, that is accurate.
Well, I know, but like I know, like it's kind of like it's more towards the left, like it's not like right in the middle. I think like
no.
As some people think, but he's not doing like, you know, the classic like neck sucking or whatever.
Well, he does do that a little bit later because he straight up murders two children by biting them in the neck and dropping their dead body to the floor, which is where I am like, yes. The kids died and the cat survived. That is like the best outcome that this movie. But that's actually another thing that's really like consistent in all versions of Nosferatu. There's always cats at like the main character's house. It's just like a weird like tradition they've kept.
I love how I love how much of an animal guy Eggers is. Like all of his movies are just like, I feel like steadily get more and more like animals in them.
Yeah, all this stuff in the castle's good, and obviously as he's away, Ellen's becoming a little bit more delirious and getting into these weird like almost exorcist-like possession moments and spats, and they're tying her to the bed. We meet the doctor character. He's knocking her out, and they're very confused by what's happening. And also around this time, the guy who sent Thomas to the castle in the first place starts acting like Renfield. They basically find him having like killed like some animals and eating them raw. So they've put him in like one of the old like sort of like prison cells underneath the hospital, and he's just eating the head off of a bird. And that's one of the other things of this movie is I wouldn't describe it as a particularly gory movie in general, but whenever it does do something where there's something disgusting, it's really disgusting.
Yeah. I wasn't really familiar with who this actor was, but I thought he did a really good job. Again, he's like kind of this gruff looking like old guy. It feels like he really fits in that time frame. And there's a nice little bit where like early on when you don't really know much about him, and he could just be a normal guy, but he's talking to Thomas, and you just noticed like there was like a little like something on his head that like I don't know, looked like some scabs or like scars or something. And I just thought it was like interesting that I was like, oh, like that's kind of weird, what is that? And then I feel like I don't know, it's just a nice setup for like as the movie goes on, it kind of becomes like more like I don't know, kind of hideous and stuff. Like he's not like changing like that much, but I mean maybe just because it's like him like eating all these animals and like raving and stuff. Like it's I thought it was a nice progression of him like just seeming more and more crazy as the film goes on.
Yeah, I mean, he eventually does bite someone's neck and just rips like a big chunk of their neck out. I think that's when he's escaping from the prison cell, maybe. But yeah, everything with him eating stuff and like doing whatever is super disgusting. And even sometimes when Nosferatu is biting people, it's pretty disgusting. But the sound design, especially, it really makes it like,
yeah. He's like taking like these like long, like sips or gulps or whatever, and you kind of see like his whole like body moving. It's it's a lot.
Yeah, so we introduced to Von Franz somewhere around here. I love how every time we go to say a character's name in this, we're clearly thinking of the Dracula name instead, and then we have to like pivot in our heads, because every single time either one of us goes to say Thomas, we all like, okay, it's not Jonathan, Thomas, every time. But he we introduced to him, and obviously he seems quite kooky at first, particularly to Friedrich, who thinks he's just a whack or a quack. Ducks fly together. Quack, see? Yeah, Mighty Ducks, that's the whole thing.
Oh, anyway, right.
I don't know, I said quack and I started thinking of Mighty Ducks.
Of course.
But yeah, like I think this middle part is where the pacing is a little bit, not even necessarily really bad, but just sort of like kind of all over the place in some ways. Which is not to say that I don't like a lot of what's going on, but it's definitely a bit more exposition-y, which I don't think is something that Eggers is good at. He's very good at the ethereal dread. He's good at the cinematography. He's good at kind of this overall foreboding tone. I think when he needs to have characters just explain what something is, that's where he shows a bit more of his weaknesses, because then you just have Willem Dafoe trying to explain, what's going on and like what a vampire is and whatever else.
Yeah, I guess on the one hand that's fair, but then on the other hand, it's like, I don't know, the actors he's working with are so good that I don't mind it, because it's like Willem Dafoe, and like I'm kind of hanging on to like every word.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can't really fight that, but I think one of the things that stuck out to me with Friedrich, so like I say, he like kind of like gets more frazzled, and he says things like, know your place, and he wants Ellen gone. when Thomas does return on horseback eventually after being kind of mended a little bit by some nuns who find him in the river, like he eventually slumps in and like they're happy he's back, but quite quickly the first time that Anna is attacked, it's basically Nosferatu does the whole thing where he puts his hands out and he becomes a shadow and he travels over the city in shadow form. He gets to Ellen, great visuals, and she rejects him, and he's like, hey, you've got 3 days to accept me and I will kill the people you care about. And it's that night, I think, or maybe the next night, where he goes and bites Anna, right? So she gets sick, she gets delirious, she gets weird. And that's when Friedrich freaks out and kicks them out and says, hey, you and Thomas need to go. And says, hey, know your place. Like, you, and basically tries to like have the upper hand and sort of like say, hey, you're the ones that are out of line. And Helen just kind of like the scene ends with her yelling back at him. I can't even remember what the line was, but she's basically just yells about, you know, there's an evil here, we have to do something about this. Like, she doesn't back down, she doesn't like just sort of get like sad and like quiet and like adhere to what he's saying because it's awkward now. She sort of like stands her ground and tries to fight. But sure enough, you know, we see them, and at this point the entire city's under like plague conditions and they're going back to their place, and it's all very kind of eerie and a lot of foreboding stuff. But so when Orlok comes back the next night or whatever, right? Because even like I think Von Franz says to him, he's going to come back and finish the job. Like, he's taken her blood. He is going to come back and kill her. If I think that's one of the things Ellen said, is she yells out, we're all going to die. You're going to die. Anna's going to die. We're all going to die, and tries to make it clear to him how big the stakes are. But it's when Orlok comes back, where when whoever it is walks in the room, is it him? Is it Friedrich who walks in the room and catches him with the two daughters, and like the daughter's just hanging from his neck, and he just drops her dead body?
No, because it's at night, and the mom, she's still alive, so she wakes up, and then
she's the one who walks in.
Yeah, because Count Orlok says like, don't get up to Frederick. Like, he puts him on a spell. Basically, he can't wake up because she's like trying to wake him up.
That's right.
And he can't.
He's lying with his old-fashioned pistol because he's scared of something coming into the house. But yeah, he just magically is told to stay asleep.
Yeah, and then she goes and sees the two kids. Very, very unfortunate. I felt like that was gonna happen like pretty early on, though. I was like, like when the kids are like talking about like, oh, there's like a monster in my bed. I was like, yeah. And then eventually there is gonna be an actual monster under their bed. Yeah, so that was sad. And then they get these very like small but very tall coffins.
Yeah, because it basically cuts from this shock ending of the scene to the funeral procession, and they're carrying like a normal coffin for the wife, right? And then you see these two little coffins, and you're like, oh no, that's like, I love joking about kids getting killed in movies, but even I'm having a hard time cracking jokes about little coffins. And then I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if this was a part of the other Nosferatus, but I feel like one of the big differences between like this and Dracula is we don't see him actually like making other vampires. Like, it's just like, that doesn't other than the one that the villagers kill earlier on. I don't think this movie has, because I was expecting Anna to wake up as a vampire, and it never happened. I was kind of thinking that's where it was going to go. Yeah, I also feel like I don't think there's like an equivalent to Friedrich and Anna in the 79 version, or at least if they're there, they're much smaller characters, because like they're such a big part of this movie, and I definitely don't remember them getting anywhere near this much focus if there was an equivalent. There's definitely a second couple in the original Dracula book, and therefore some of the, because you've got Mina and Lucy, and you've got Jonathan and whoever Lucy's with. Yeah,
so like that's what I was gonna say is like I can't think of an equivalent to the Herzog Nosferatu, but again, if you're looking at Dracula, like Anna feels like she would be the Lucy replacement, and then I kind of felt like Frederick might be I always forget the name. Is it like Quincy or something? But there is like a cowboy in like Dracula that is like one of Lucy's suitors, and I don't know, like maybe like Frederick's like facial hair and
Yeah,
holding his gun made me think he might be similar to that character.
And just to confuse matters for anyone who's saying they're saying that she's the Lucy parallel, isn't Ellen the Lucy parallel? No, Lucy's the Mina. The reason why you're confused is because one or two of the Dracula movies called Mina Lucy for some reason. Yeah. But in the book, Mina's the one who's with Jonathan and Lucy's her friend. So just keeping that straight. Because I don't know what movie. I think it may even be Herzog's Nosferatu that's guilty of it, and I love that movie. But damn you, why did you call her Lucy? It's just confusing. Anyway,
and then I do feel kind of bad, like always talking about Dracula, but like even this movie says like, you know, in the credits at the end it says like, you know, based on Nosferatu and Bram Stoker's Dracula novel. So I feel like he's kind of taking from both, or I don't know.
Well, even if he took nothing that wasn't from Nosferatu, he's still taking from both, because Nosferatu took from Dracula. So, like, yeah, Dracula should be credited as a based on for sure, as should Nosferatu. So, like, they're both deserving of credits, even though technically, because it's public domain, I don't know if you actually have to credit Dracula now. But regardless, I think what's interesting here is that when I said Friedrich's such a key character to understanding what the movie's saying and doing with its themes, obviously the way he acts and everything he does is a part of that. But here, you know, he's very distraught, and then Thomas tries to prove to him, no, it's real. Look at my chest. I've got these wounds. This is real. Like this evil is real. And he kind of seems to accept it at this point, but he's kind of like zoned out, and he's not really listening to them as they start making plans. And what do we do? Do we try and find his coffin? Blah blah blah. And then of course his big tragic ending is that he goes back to the mausoleum, the crypt, whatever. He takes the top of the coffin off of his wife's coffin, and he seemingly, you know, he kisses her, he picks her up and kisses her. And I was thinking she might wake up, obviously, like we said. But when they find him, he's just lying dead on top of her. And I think the big thing here for me was how similar the visual at the end is of Nosferatu on top of Ellen. Is very much the same pose. And it kind of felt like the movie's drawing intentional comparisons between how Friedrich sees like, oh, his life is like a measure of his success. Like, oh, you know, I've got a wife, I've got children, but he's not got a boy yet. So that's what he wanted next. He kept referring to the unborn kid as a boy. So that's what he wanted. That's what he saw as his next frontier. But you know, so this idea that like he ended up just dying with the object of his affection, which is his wife, that he just saw as the woman who's there to satisfy his desires when they pop up, as opposed to this genuine, you know, one-to-one human connection that it's supposed to be. And Nosferatu, likewise, sought out Ellen as like his obsession. Like, this is like the thing I need her because she belongs to me. I have to achieve this, and ultimately dies just the same way that Friedrich does on top of her. That's
a nice comparison. I didn't think about that when I was watching the movie, but I mean, it's like he even said earlier, is like, I can't control myself around her. Like, I guess even in death he can't stop himself.
He's dead with her. They find him like that, and then even though it's already nightfall, they run off to try and find Dracula's coffin, and this is the false hunt, as we said. You know, the setup that it's actually Ellen who's going to try and take on Nosferatu herself, because the scene that I referenced earlier, where she starts acting more crazy, and it leads to them having sex, where she starts belittling Thomas. That happened the night before, I think. Anna and the kids were killed, or maybe it was even the same night actually, but that's when that took place. So they've kind of like found this strength to try and fight back, but she makes this choice that it has to be her. She has to be the one that does this. She's the only one, and this is because at this point I hadn't really fully formed all my ideas yet, but I definitely got the feeling that no, she has to be the one, because Nosferatu represents her own demons. And only she can face her own demons. I really got that vibe from what it was doing here as it was getting into its final chunk. But sure enough, she invites Nosferatu in, says, you know, come get me. Embraces him, they kiss. At first I thought they're having sex, and I guess they were having sex, but it also was just kind of like him biting her chest and going in for the, the blood and whatnot. And the idea being here is that if she can just keep him feeding on her, then he will stay there too late and it'll be sunrise and he'll die. And there's a really sort of pivotal moment where he looks up and sees the sun's coming up, and she's sort of like, even though she's very weak at this point, she's clearly nearly dead. She's like, no more, keep drinking. And he can't resist it. And then they both die. But it's this idea that if he hadn't kept drinking, she might have lived as well. But then he'd still be alive. So it was like, the only way to take the pain of what had happened with her completely away from the world was that she herself had to be away from the world. You know, it's the idea that whatever this trauma is, whether what you compare it to, like childhood abuse, sexual abuse, or you want to compare it to just anything in someone's past, this idea that the only way for it to go away and for the people around her to not deal with it is that if she herself is not there to be dealt with entirely. You can't have her without the past that she's tied to and the experience she's carrying. And to me, that's what the ending kind of was. But that visual of like the skinny Nosferatu lying on top of her, like the legs and waist especially, look like a skeleton almost. I thought that was a very stark visual.
Absolutely, yeah. It is like very, like he's such a disgusting like looking figure, like when he's just all like completely naked, and just seeing him like on top of it like that is very upsetting.
Yeah, and it's sadly the example of agency she gets in the movie, because like no one else listened to her. Except Von Franz, who seems to be, again, very happy. He picks up the cat, looks out the window at the sunrise, and that's how the movie ends, pretty much, barring that final shot looking down at the body. But the cat survives, so hey.
Good for them.
All is well.
I was happy for the cat too. I did think of you when I saw that. I was like, well, you'll appreciate that.
I definitely did. Also, we didn't mention that the Renfield character Enoch, he was actually like a decoy in Dracula's coffin. So when they opened the coffin and just stabbed with the iron like spike or whatever, it was him that got stabbed with it. So he kind of like dies for his master right there and then, before they set fire to the whole place, and Willem Dafoe is just like chewing the flaming scenery, enjoying himself.
The Renfield guy though, he seemed pretty happy to be dying for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's happy to have a purpose and serve a master, and he's so devout that he's willing to die for him. And maybe there's something there about the dangers of like idolizing like your masters or your superiors too much or whatever.
I'm sure you can make like some parallel to, these weirdos online that are like, so obsessed with some like, rich famous people or whatever that don't care about them at all. Or like, when you idolize like a politician or something that doesn't give two shits about you, but you're just like, oh yeah, whatever you say. And
so what you're saying is this character should have just had a t-shirt saying release the Snyder Cut on it.
Sure.
The t-shirt hadn't been invented yet, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, that's the thing. I think if you're the sort of person who loves like the costume and set design of like a period piece, this movie does go all out in that regard. All the big thick coat. I mean, even Nosferatu himself has this big kind of like war coat, right? It's the sort of thing like an army general of like the 1700s or something might have worn. I'm probably way off with that. It's maybe even older than that because he's meant to be old. But because isn't the whole thing that Dracula was based in some way on Vlad the Impaler?
That's what they say.
Yeah. So if that's the sort of look, this is something that I would expect Vlad the Impaler to wear. Is this big coat with the furred neck and the hat and whatnot? But it's definitely a little bit different looking to classic Nosferatu. I definitely have like a image in my head of what Nosferatu looks like, and this is definitely a more of a new spin on it versus like I think the original Nosferatu from the 1920s versus the Herzog one, they're very similar in design and aesthetic as far as the character goes. Whereas this one feels like, no, we're doing something where we're kind of mixing it with what a character from history looks like, mixed with the monstrous elements of the character.
Yeah, like the other versions, Nosferatu, like they seem a bit more like a little less human. Like they're a bit like rat like, or they have this kind of animalistic look to them. Where I feel like they're going, yeah, a bit more human for this, but still maintaining this kind of monstrosity to it.
Yeah, he's very tall in this one.
Yeah.
They've got him standing on a box whenever he's in a scene with someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rat-like thing's a good point, though, because obviously the whole idea of the rat spreading the plague.
Mm-hmm.
So having him himself look like he's got rat features kind of makes sense in a lot of way.
Yeah.
So I get that. I get that as a comparison. So no, it's a very pretty movie. It's very pretty. I will say that the music is mostly, there's like one track towards the end I think stood out to me as being quite good. For the most part, the music just kind of faded into the background for me. I didn't really notice it too much.
Yeah, I actually had a friend that was asking me like how the score was, and honestly, I can't really, like, I don't think I had a problem with it, but I can't recall like much of it. So maybe I'll try to keep more of an ear out on another viewing, but yeah, not much like super stood out to me. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, just maybe not like the most
yeah
memorable.
No, I mean there's definitely yeah, there's a difference between it not being like notable and being bad, and it's not bad. It's definitely high quality enough, and I do think there's one track towards the end is that all the finale stuff is playing out that's got a bit of emotion in it, which is quite nice. But for the most part, it's not trying to like take over, and maybe that would have improved things a little bit for me. Even is like if it did take over a little bit at times, maybe if during some of those like middle portions there was like some haunting or emotional sort of themes playing out. Because I think what sticks out to me about this version as well is that I think it really tries to make you care about the main two characters' relationship a bit more. Like they're caring for each other feels like a more of a focus in this one versus some of the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that it felt. It did feel like they genuinely cared for each other versus like maybe other versions where it might just feel more like, well, I love you because you're my wife and you belong to me or something, like, so, it felt like there was an actual connection and that they did kind of like, make each other happy.
All right. Well, I mean, I think we're ready to do wrap up stuff then. Tim, what was your scene of the movie?
Man, it's tough because I think there is so many like really gorgeous looking scenes. Like, like if I'm gonna pick something, like it's probably gonna be something that just really stood out to me as just being like, oh, like this, I love the way this looks. There's a couple of different things I'm like tempted to say, but I might go with, and I don't know if this is like an easy answer, a little bit of a short scene, but yeah, that scene where Thomas is just walking in the forest and it's just so dark and it just has a great look to it, and it's just like gently snowing, and then the horse and the carriage like run up to him, and yeah, I mean, I honestly, there's so many scenes I love, but I mean that's one that really stood out to me and that I can still like visualize in my head because it's just so beautiful. But I guess I'll go with that.
Yeah, I get it. It's one of the more visually striking scenes earlier on. I also like the shot of the carriage going towards the castle. It makes me think of the 1931 Dracula as well. I think it's tough because the ending's good. I really like the scenes where he kind of becomes a shadow and travels that way. So that might be a pick as well. Yeah, I'll go with that, but it is tough. There's a few different things that we could go with here. All right, MVP of the movie.
Again, it's really really tough because I feel like there's a lot of different people I could pick. I think the the choices it would come down to me would probably be, either Orlok or Ellen. Yeah, I think again, I'm very surprised that how engrossed I became in, Lily Rose Depp's performance and her character work and all that stuff. So I think. Oh, and I'd probably also throw a bone to Willem Dafoe. Like again, you might be chewing the scenery a bit, but he's very entertaining, and I really liked all the scenes. But I don't know. I feel bad going for the bad guy since it, I feel like it's so much for, Ellen's story. But I really thought, they did a good job with, just making Orlok so menacing, and it felt like a new version while also, this is a good example of, I wouldn't say like a remake of, but like, a reimagining where it feels like it's doing something new, but it never feels like it's wildly betraying, any of the like original characters or stuff from before, but it's also not like just retreading kind of the same old stuff. So yeah, I think I'll give it up for whichever Skarsgård played Orlok
Bell,
here.
I believe, is the Skarsgård you're looking for.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll go for. I mean, yeah, like 78% of it is the mustache, which is glorious, but yeah. I mean, really, there's so much. I feel like you could pick in the movie though.
Nosferatu.
Sure, whatever.
No,
that means. I don't understand.
Well, mustache, Nosferatu.
Okay. I thought you. I don't know that was like Gaelic or something. That I was like.
I don't speak Gaelic, phrase. You racist prick. All right. Where's my MVP? Oh, this is actually tough because I think there's arguments for a few people here. Ellen/Lily for, and her name's Lily Rose. Technically, it's a double barrel name, so it's technically wrong to just call her Lily. But
I'm sure.
Yeah. Like she of course like does a lot of the weight, and she's kind of the character who's the center of it all, and like what the movie's really about in some ways is like the trauma she's going through. Obviously, Orlok himself is the big exciting thing to see because he's the monster, and it's more cinematic, even arguably a little cheesy with the voice sometimes, but in like an endearing way. And then you've got Dafoe just being Dafoe and being enjoyable to watch, but. If I'm comparing Dafoe here to Dafoe in Lighthouse, or even something like Poor Things from last year, where I'm like, okay, this is good Dafoe, but it's not best Dafoe. So, it's, yeah. Anyway, I think that's an argument for Friedrich, actually, because Friedrich, like I said, is kind of like, he's the key in a lot of ways to like kind of like understanding a lot of what the movie's doing with its themes, and he's so important to like kind of giving the audience like all the comparisons that they need to follow everything. I think there's a genuine argument for him as a character. It's just the question is that does that necessarily translate to feeling like he adds the most to the movie? So I'm having a tough time to pick. I think ultimately I am going to agree and go with Orlok just because he is the exciting thing to see. And I don't even necessarily like Bill Skarsgård that much generally. I think, I don't love his Pennywise, and I think his villain in John Wick 4, like I love John Wick 4 as an action movie, but his villain is like one of the weakest parts of that thing. He's just such a cheesy villain in that movie. He's overdoing it. So I'm very conflicted on him as an actor, but I do think Orlok in this movie is he's a presence, for better or worse, every single time he shows up. So I'm going to go with that. All right, what are you rating Nosferatu?
and just for completionist sake, like I feel like there's like some things we didn't even really touch upon. Like we didn't even mention the boat scene, which I mean,
actually, yeah, I was, you know what, I'd forgotten to bring that up. You're right, but the thought I had as I was watching the movie, it's like, man, it's insane how these 2 or 3 scenes are so much better than Last Voyage of the Demeter.
I thought the same thing. As I was watching, I was like, you know, it is such a shame that like, because I think that it is a compelling part of, you know, Dracula, the Voyage of the Demeter, and it is just such a shame that movie is just so boring and forgettable. Not to say that like, you know, the ship scene here like stole the show from me or anything. Like, yeah, it was fine, whatever. But as just bring it up, I think it's like one of the few things we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe I'm just in the bag for this movie because it's just hitting on a lot of things that I like.
Here we go. I've got a funny feeling you're about to go a bit too high, but on you go.
Well, I mean, it's my opinion.
You cook the books. Yeah, but sometimes you cook the books and... Oh, that reminds me, actually, Tim. I've got something to tell you after we're done with the review.
Okay.
Like, on the episode, but we'll wait until the scores are in. Oh,
okay. No, I mean, I love Eggers. Again, he... Like, The Northman's not my favorite, but I wouldn't say that I dislike it. And, you know, the other movies he's done, they've pretty much all been home runs, and this is no exception. It's honestly like a director who I don't want to say like one of my favorites, because I don't know, even though I guess, you know, the Witch was what, like 10 years ago or something now.
Almost, if it wasn't. I mean, if it wasn't 2015, it was 2016, so it's in that range. So
I mean, like, yeah, it still feels like kind of like a new director to me. But I don't know. I like a lot of these movies so much. Maybe he is kind of becoming one of my favorites. So I mean, his style mixed with like, just doing one of my like favorite stories. It all really worked for me, and I don't know. I know some of the people again. Has seen some more of the flaws, but I don't know that I just I'm pretty awestruck of this movie. I'm not seeing as much, so I'm not gonna give it like a perfect score, but I think I'm gonna go really high and give it a 9. And I don't know, that could even potentially go up on further viewings if, I don't know, my excitement like still holds for it. But I don't know, there's just so much I love about this world and what he's doing, and like visually it grabs me so much that I can't look away from the screen, and it really holds my attention. And I don't know, I'm really into this, so very high score for me. I was very, very happy with it, because again, I was a little nervous with hearing some of the more kind of middling responses it was getting from people, but I'm glad that it, you know, really worked for me.
So that was a 9, you said?
Yes.
Okay. What do I want to go with? I don't know. I'm conflicted. Don't worry, I was getting a good score either way. It's not it's in no means a bad score, but I think I'm just on that it's great, but it's not like jaw-dropping amazing either. Like I think the Herzog version is a little bit more for me, but I do think this was very good. It was a nice experience. I am curious to watch it again with the themes in mind, and sort of like maybe further kind of pay attention to those as the movie's playing out. But I think for me, I think it's just a really strong 8 out of 10. You know, I think it's a great movie, but I don't think it's like, you know, changing the world. You know, it's not quite at the level of like, oh, this is special like The Witch was, but it's really, really good. So yeah, there you go. That's Nosferatu.
Sneaking it in there at the end of 2024.
Yeah, well, they did. I mean, it's 2025 for us, but they...
I know, I'm just saying it's one of the like last, you know, it's eligible for the...
Yes.
Whenever we do the best of 2024.
Yes, it's the last 2024 release that we'll cover. Not the last one we're doing on the show. We've still got like 2.5 months of 2024 movies we're going to do, but it's the last one that was released that we'll cover.
Yeah.
Because it was right at the end of the year. But yeah, so I have something to tell you actually before I get to the usual rambles afterwards. So during the Christmas stream, Tim, that I do on Twitch every year, there was a goal titled Tim's Christmas Present.
Okay.
All right. And they knew what the present was, but if the goal was hit, then you would get this thing.
Okay.
So unfortunately, it was hit, and it means that before we do our top 10, we have to review Hellboy the Crooked Man.
Okay. I don't know if I'd call that a Christmas present for me.
Well, I said no, we're not doing it, and you kept saying we should. So,
well, I don't want to do it with someone that's just gonna poo all over it.
I will go in with an open mind, but if it's shit, Tim. I can't do anything about it if the quality's not there.
All right. Well, it's gonna be a very decisive episode.
Oh, you're not even decisive. Divisive, you mean, Tim?
Divisive.
Decisive.
Well, I'm gonna decide. I'm gonna decide if it's decisive.
He wasn't even happy. People were excited about you hearing about this. So you immediately went, "Oh, that's not a present. Oh, this sucks."
Listen, I'll be excited to watch the movie again, but I'm assuming I'll probably have to tune you out a lot too.
All right, fine. I see how it is.
Listen, this is what I tell everyone going if they're ever curious about watching it. It's obviously it's a very cheap movie, so I'm totally okay, ragging on like the special effects and stuff. I admit they're pretty bad, but I do think it works better to go in with an open mind and be like, okay, I'm gonna watch a pretty low budget version of this character and stuff. So but it's not like you liked any of the other Hellboy movies, so it's not like you're gonna go in expecting it's gonna be on the same level as those. So I'm a little embarrassed to admit this because I think it is kind of like a little lame when it's like you really like a director that's doing like their own like cool thing, and then to instantly be like, oh well, they should do the next Captain Marvel movie or whatever. But as I was watching Nosferatu, I was kind of thinking like, if he ever wanted to, I think Eggers could make a pretty dope Hellboy movie. Like if he did one that was kind of like a more of a period piece and like one of his like kind of random adventures in like the 60s or something. I don't know.
This is a bit pie in the sky. That's right here.
I don't think it's gonna happen, but like I think
this is like if you're like, oh, I mean, I think Christopher Nolan could really do a really good Animal Man movie. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Or Stanley Kubrick, even he could do. I don't know, pick another D-list comic book character.
Hey, I mean, it's fun to think about. I mean, just because he did such a good job, like with the gothic, scenery and stuff in this, which I mean, that's something that you see a lot in like the Hellboy books. That I was like, hell, that would be cool. Obviously, probably won't happen, but hey,
give me Robert Eggers' Swamp Thing. I'll take that. If he's going to do a comic book property, cool. I'll take that one.
I'd be down for that. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well there you go. So that's coming up soon. I don't know what week that'll end up slotting into, but next week we'll be looking at Trap, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. So look forward to that. And of course, if you like the show, you can support the show over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Every month there's an exclusive episode for patrons. We got one coming up that was a vote winner. We're even putting extra 2024 movies onto the bonus episode just now. We'll be looking at New Life on the next exclusive episode. That was a vote winner, like I said. So that's cool. Plus, we'll be doing some like sequels to some of the smaller franchises on bonus episodes later this year and stuff like that. So, plus every month we also do even more streams, which is where we normally do like a top 5 or maybe a discussion topic or something like that. We're doing like an extra special one for January, which has become a bit of a tradition where we'll do like here's just like a list of all the horror movies we know are coming out this year. Let's just go through the list give our feelings, thoughts, expectations, and just sort of do like a preview special. So that's coming very soon on Patreon this month. But that normally even more can be anything from like 20 minutes to an hour long. That episode will be like a 90-minute, 2-hour extravaganza, depending on how big the list is.
Let's not go crazy, but I mean...
Tim, do you want to check what last year's was? Because I've got a funny feeling it fell into that parameter.
All right. I'll see if I can take off work the next day. And by the way, I don't mean this. I don't want to be shitty with with our lovely patrons. I'm glad that they were thinking of me for the Christmas bonus. It'll be, I think. I think it'll be a fun episode. I'm sure it'll be very entertaining. And hey, if it gets maybe some of our listeners to actually watch the Hellboy movie that haven't watched it before, and then God bless, we're doing the Lord's work. But I got the Blu-ray, so I have been meaning to watch it again. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I felt bad. He's like, oh no, my reaction was too mean. I need to pedal back now. And I'm excited to watch it, and who knows, maybe a Christmas miracle will happen, and you'll finally dust the cobwebs from your eyes and see a good movie for what it is instead of. I mean, it'll be more of an Easter miracle by the time we get to it, to be honest. But no, I bet it's the drizzling shits, and I'm going to tell you that it's the drizzling shits in as many ways as creatively as I can.
Well, who knows? Maybe it'll be the last episode of the show. We'll see how it goes.
Oh dear. Anyway, that is the show, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, the Patreon also has bonuses for other shows. If you haven't checked out the other shows that I do with David on Male Fuzz Movies, we have the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is a sci-fi movie podcast. It's not like this show, but for sci-fi movies. And then there's the Collector's Cut, where similar format, but that tends to be in little seasons. So like right now we're doing the Airport franchise from the 70s. We did the Die Hard series before that. Sometimes we'll like pick a director and do like a director's like 10 movies from a director over 10 weeks kind of thing. So if that sounds like fun, go check out those. But that is the show, everyone. That has been Screams After Midnight. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.